But what's really interesting about these burial stones collected by Cabrera and a number of others is the fact that they depict dinosaurs. Here is one of the large stones here in the center of a room he has built for displaying this in the front of his 300-year-old mansion. He is a descendant of the conquistadors. This is one of the castles they built, and he lives in it. And of course, he passed away in 2002. But looking closely at this stone, you can see the very obvious dinosaur with the dermal frills on its back, a man sitting atop fighting, evidently. And then we look at the top of the stone, and we see it's ornately covered with carvings. And a closer view, you see the upper right-hand corner, the very obvious sauropod dinosaur with the man in his mouth, dangling by the foot. Beautifully and artistically done in stone. But there are thousands of these. Some 11,000 burial stones have been collected by the Cabreras. About a third of them are this disgusting pornography, and then about a third of them are of dinosaurs. Here we see many of them are shown with man associated, but in battle. Here he's chopping the neck. In this one, he's already chopped the neck and holding the head in his hand of possibly a juvenile form, but then looks like Mama has got him from behind, or at least another younger one attacking him, and together with a much larger one on the same stone. Another one here is being bitten as he rides on the back. Notice the variety in styles. This is rather Oriental in style. Very different, but obviously very similar. This one's very, maybe literalistic, if you please. Some almost cartoonish. Another Oriental style dinosaur. This beautiful stone is almost 4 feet tall. Again, very artistically done with the dermal frills on the back, which were written up for the first time in Geology magazine in 1992. When Mr. Sinclair depicted his dinosaur on the Sinclair dinosaur sign, he didn't know it had dermal frills on the back, but they did down in Peru over 2,000 years ago, and here we see them depicted on the stones. It looks like a scene maybe out of Jurassic Park. No question about the species that's depicted here. Some rather artistically and stylistically done, cartoonish, and then very literal. Here are a number of different species depicted on the same stone. Again, a tremendous variety is obvious. One person, again, did not do this. But this is not the only museum that depicts dinosaurs on the burial stones. Another very interesting display of these stones is seen in the museum there in Inca. It was actually established by Dr. Cabrera over 20 years ago. They have a collection, but they will not display it. We had talked to the brother of Carlos Solti, Pablos, who had donated the collection to the museum about 15 years ago, and we had seen pictures of the stones that he had donated. His brother had excavated them in the 50s near the village of Ocaqueji, and then donated this to the museum upon the death of his brother. We went there, said, we want to see this collection. They said, it doesn't exist, that's a myth. We said, we've seen the pictures, we've talked to the one who donated the collection. They said, well, yes, okay, it does exist, but they're in storage and you can't see them. We insisted, saying this is a museum that's not supposed to hide things, it's supposed to show things. They said, well, you can't do this unless you're authorized by an official museum with 48 hours notice. We said, we think we can handle that, and we did. We got a letter from an official state-authorized museum authorizing us to examine them. With 48 hours notice, we came back. They still refused. They said, you will not be allowed to examine these. They were stonewalling. Dr. Swift eventually did gain access last year and got pictures, and yes, they are virtually, well, they are the same as the ones that we see in the Jules Rudd collection with dinosaurs on them. We did get to examine the ones in the collection at the Aeronautical Museum in Lima, pictured here. Years ago, there were many more. They have disappeared over the years. There were several hundred initially. There are about 40 that remain. But here we see one on the floor in the room where they are displayed, and these are the poorer ones. The better ones have disappeared, but you can still see the dinosaurs on the stones displayed in the Aeronautical Museum in Lima. In the museum in Nazca, likewise, they have some of the carved stones on display. And here we see Dr. Swift laboring as he holds up one of the stones for the camera. The stones are exhibited in the Cabrera Museum, where there are 11,000 of them. In the Museum of Inca, where they're hidden, and they wouldn't allow us to see them. Dr. Swift did eventually get, and then Nazca Museum and the Aeronautical Museum and the Naval Museum. But we see here the museums which have these stones, all but one of them have them on display that can be seen today. We traveled to the village of Okekehi, where a number of these stones, or at least in the area, where a number of these stones had been excavated in the 50s by Carlos Solti, who was the rector of the College of Engineers in Lima. And there we see an obviously very depressed area. We see individuals who just eking out a living. Basilio Achua is one of the individuals here who has found a number of these stones and had taken them to Dr. Cabrera. He took us out to the place where many had been excavated, and we could see the actual tombs and see some of the stones in the tombs. As we walked along this desolate area, you could see the bones that had been strewn along the way by the grave robbers, who weren't interested in the bones at all, but in the artifacts that they could dig out to sell. In these tombs, you see amazing preservation, even of flesh parts. In an area where it hasn't rained for 100 years, the dryness of the desert is excellent for preservation. But in these tombs, you can see the remains of the mummies. This is a trophy head that was worn on the belt by this brutal culture. In one of the nearby museums, you see the skulls with a hole in the head. This means that was a trophy head. It had been worn by somebody who had evidently killed them in battle. But as we look at these tombs, we see often babies with mothers. Maybe if the mother died, they couldn't take care of the babies, and I don't know the whole story, but it doesn't look like a nice story. Here we see one of the well-preserved mummies together with a number of bones that have been found in the area. And in this particular tomb, you see one of the burial stones in situ, in place. And you see this on a number of occasions. Here's another one of the burial stones beside one of the mummies with a dinosaur on it. This one was excavated in 2005. The drawing here shows what's seen on it, not as dramatically clear as with some of them, but it can be seen very clearly. It has been examined carefully by a number of laboratories, and we see the close-up of some of the carvings showing the patina in the grooves, also testifying to its antiquity. This was one that was excavated in 2006 that is in a collection that I own. This is about a 70-pound stone. It has 3 dinosaurs on it. It was from about 100 miles away from the Paracas Peninsula, and the carving style is slightly different. You can see the teeth are raised rather than incised. The bias relief is in evidence here, but the same style, again depicting the dinosaurs. Many say, well, Cabrera was a strange fella, and we can't depend on his testimony. Well, I think he was a very credible witness, but we have many, many different sources. Notice that the first one is the Spanish priest who in 1525 described these stones, and there have been several reports of this. The chronicler of the Incas wrote of these stones in 1570. In detail, they found the stones with the strange animals on them. And then Bolivia Cabrera, the grandfather of the one that we worked with there, began collecting the stones in the 30s, and then Javier Cabrera continued the collection amassing some 11,000 of the stones. He was professor of medicine at the University of Lima, head of the Department of Medicine for 20 years. He established the largest teaching hospital in Peru and retired to be cultural anthropologist for Inca. This is not a lightweight in terms of a witness, but if you want to ignore him, there are many others. There's Carlos Solti, who excavated the stones at Ocoqueji in the 50s. Pablo Solti, who is his brother, donated the stones to the museum in 1968. The museum denied it, promised to show them to us if we met their conditions, and then refused, but then finally did reveal them. Yes, they have them there. And then Basilio Ochoa of Ocoqueji excavated a number of the stones. The Aeronautical Museum displays many of the stones today, as does the Regional Museum in Nazca. I, together with Dr. Swift, have observed them in the tombs in situ. University of Bonn in Germany has confirmed the oxidized patina in a number of the stones, and grave robbers continue to excavate these carved stones. You can still dig them up. Now, that's an impressive array of confirmation. And if you don't like Dr. Cabrera, then okay, toss him out. You still have an impressive array of confirmation. In addition to the stones, we find in the tombs other things that display the dinosaurs, like the textiles, the burial cloths that were associated with them. Many of them show the dinosaur motif, as do the vases, the pottery. This is in the National Museum in Lima. Under it has a sign circa 2,500 years before present. And then the Moshi vases, very famous for their style, inability to reproduce them. They're showing clearly dinosaurs. And then some of the gold death masks that were found up in northern Peru likewise show the dinosaurs. Notice the dermal frills on the back, the huge teeth, the tail curving up over their back on either side of the face here. It's obvious that the people of Peru were seeing dinosaurs from their vases and their death masks and their textiles, as well as the thousands of stones that can be seen today. I think that's just really irrefutable evidence.